To my right is Representative Nick Milroy, State Representative from Superior, representing most of Douglas County and parts of Washburn County. Representative Bewley had another commitment this morning, but will be joining us approximately at 11 o'clock. This is the fourth listening session that I've had in the district since the legislature adjourned. I'm trying to hold sessions throughout the district to discuss issues of concern for citizens and to provide citizens information that they may not have had to get the facts straight about the many complicated and controversial issues the legislature has dealt with in the last 2 years. What is important, I think, to recognize is that we are here to listen, but also to inform. As Paul Harvey used to say, here is the rest of the story. In this very hyperactive, political, hypertensive, partisan political environment that we live in this country, where people are so divided, so angry at each other.
Yeah, who's
often
dividing us?
All right, quiet, please. Quiet. Let him talk.
When one comes to Hurley, the one thing that you know you're going to expect is civility. That's the reputation of the citizens of Hurley and Iron County, regardless of their politics. They are respectful people. They tolerate differences. And I know that that is the widespread feeling of most of you, regardless of what your feeling is on this issue. As I was saying, that we live in this very divided country, where there is too much of a tendency to shout rather than to learn, where there is an unwillingness to compromise and too much of a desire to confront, in which there is way too little unwillingness to try to come up with responsible decisions that meet the balanced interest of citizens of different views. Now this, I suspect today, as at our previous listening sessions, that the mining issue will be the topic of primary interest to each and every one of you. It's important to know that there are many voices on that issue. I have had, in the past 1 year, at least 10 different meetings, public meetings, private meetings, with individuals in Iron County, Hurley and Iron County, over the issue of mining. I've had countless other meetings over in Ashland County, sometimes with representatives from Ashland and Iron County, as we looked for solutions to a very complicated and controversial issue. This is not an issue in which people are of one voice. Indeed, though, people do support jobs. Mayors in Ashland and county and town officials in Ashland and citizens in Ashland care as much about economic development and jobs as those in Iron County. We should not have a civil war between neighbors because they have a different view on how those jobs might be created. And it is unfortunate that we have gotten to the point where this issue has almost debilitated the community, in which it has pitted good people against each other simply because they care. There are two Mayor Joes in proximity to each other. One in Hurley, Mayor Joe Bernardi in Hurley, who loves his community, serves his community, very much wants improvement for the community. So also does Joe Barabee in Mellon. They both want the same. They want the best. They want job opportunities for their children. And yet, when I've received correspondence from each of them, they've taken a different view on the particular bill. I've received correspondence from citizens in Montreal who said, vote for the Assembly bill, regardless of what's in it, vote for it at all costs. Followed by 2 or 3 more emails from Montreal where citizens have said, continue to fight for the Jauch proposal because we think it is the most responsible bill. Now, to those who come to this discussion with a sense of vengeance, we must ask you, what does it serve this democratic process if we cut one person up into pieces in order to make the other whole? The best legislation, the best government, the best democratic process is one where legislators work with citizens of different views to try to find a consensus. That happens to be the Wisconsin way. It is a tradition in Wisconsin where through open government, through deliberation and often differences of opinion, citizens and leaders have found ways to reach conclusions that are good for everybody. That's the way Wisconsin has functioned. That's the way we should continue to function, to solve problems, not salivate over the fact that we have deep differences. So let me add one more point. That people want us to work together. Regardless of your political affiliation, I cannot tell who is a Democrat, who is a Republican, who is conservative, and who is liberal. You are the faces of northern Wisconsin. You are the faces of the community. You are faces of people who care deeply about this region and its future. But you do want Democrats and Republicans in the legislature to work together. And I'm proud that I did work with Senator Schultz to put together a bipartisan bill, not on a resolution honoring a basketball team, but a bipartisan plan on a complicated, controversial topic. One that didn't generate total support from either side, but received criticism from both sides, which tells me that what he and I attempted to do was put forth a responsible plan that might move towards consensus. So the other point I want to emphasize is that it is easy for individuals to simply blame politics for everything. Politics is part of our life, certainly part of our business, where we have the responsibility of trying to respond to people who have different points of view. And you have to choose the right and responsible way to reach solutions. It's often difficult. But for those of you who have been in those 10 or 12 meetings with me over the past year, and we've had disagreements, differing points of view during those meetings, I don't think any of them would say that any time did they know that my interest in this legislation was to try to embarrass Governor Walker and make a Democratic stand. So I will show you respect. You should show those who are perhaps sitting next to you or behind you that same degree of respect this morning. Ask those who were in the meetings.
I was there.
Ask those who were in the meetings. Let me work backwards, and I'm going to take a few minutes to describe the legislation to try to set the record straight. Shortly after the legislature adjourned, I sent Governor Walker a letter encouraging him to put together a group of legislators to find a solution. I said in that letter that too much had been done, too much polarization had existed, and there was too much promise to be missed if we failed to try to finish the job. I had suggested that adjournment should not be an excuse to quit working on an issue that means so much and has divided people throughout the state of Wisconsin, particularly in this area. Following that meeting, following that letter, Governor Walker asked me to meet with him. He and I met for about 35 or 40 minutes on Wednesday evening. He had met with Senator Schultz for approximately the same amount of time prior to that meeting. Let me say that it was a cordial meeting, it was a professional meeting in which we both agreed that there is a sincere commitment to reform our mining regulatory system. We agreed that it was important to try to reach outside the legislative process to identify individuals who could be helpful in providing some direction and finding a compromise. Some people have criticized me for and questioned my efforts to seek a compromise with Governor Walker when the legislature is adjourned. I have a very simple response to that. I didn't spend the last year trying to kill a bill, but was trying to create a transparent process and an open dialogue to responsibly reform our 35-year-old law. And over that period of time, I have worked with my Republican colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, members who live in this community and Ashland community, to try to come up with a responsible piece of legislation that responds to the company's request and at the same time provides a fair and flexible process to a company, but also protects the public interest. 1 year ago, it's just about 1 year ago, the GTAC put a one-page advertisement in the local newspapers. And in that advertisement, the company laid out several of their goals. They wanted regulatory framework that needs certainty. They said, our research has persuaded us that Wisconsin could and should clarify its regulatory framework in order to attract jobs and investment in the iron mining sector. It is important to note that Senator Schultz and my proposal clarifies the regulatory framework and significantly reduces the overall regulatory review time from current law. It substantially reduces the amount of time, as a matter of fact. The ad went on to say that Minnesota and Michigan, which host all of the nation's iron mining industry, have comprehensive requirements for mining permits and demand a full environmental impact statement. Our proposal carefully mirrors Minnesota's best practices and assures a collaborative relationship between the state and the Corps of Engineers in the preparation of the environmental impact statement. And so we made the effort to put together a proposal that responds to the company's desire for clarity and the definition of ferrous mining. We included in our plan the goals stated by the company. But it is important that there were several items included in the Assembly bill promoted by the company that they did not ask for in this advertisement. They did not ask for permission to fill streams or ponds and mitigate the damage elsewhere in the state. They did not ask for permission to violate water quality standards an extra quarter of a mile from the existing mine boundaries. They did not seek changes to limit the DNR's ability to monitor groundwater contamination beneath the mine. They did not ask for language allowing mining and prospecting in state natural areas. They did not ask for a mining exemption for a contested case procedure in order to limit the rights of citizens to challenge a mining permit. And they did not ask for authority to strip away local governments of their ability to enact their own floodplains limits because they imposed strict limits on what those standards could be. When one compares, though, what the company asked for from what they didn't ask for, there is a lengthy-ish list of items that the Assembly proposal and Senator Schultz and my proposal agree on. So we agreed to significantly reduce the time and cost for a mining company by eliminating the need for an environmental impact statement in contested case process when applying for a bulk sampling permit. When I met with Matt Fifield in January of last year, his first concern was that it would take over 1.5 years to 2 years simply to gather the information through a bulk sampling permit. It's called prospect, what used to be known as prospect. I've agreed with him for a long time that it's important to shorten that period of time. And our language did, as well as the Assembly bill, reduce that amount of time by 1 year to 1.5 years or longer. We agreed to significantly reduce the time and cost for a mining company by eliminating, we agree that mining waste rock should not be subject to recycling fees, reducing potential tax liability of $172 million a year. That is not a minor or insignificant item. Now, I was in the legislature when the legislature established the recycling fee. It was not the intention of the legislature to apply recycling fees to waste rock from a mining operation. It was our intention to apply it to solid waste dumps to discourage use of landfills and utilize the money for recycling purposes. But removing that $172 million liability is no small gesture. It is a major indicator that we want to eliminate what could be a major deterrent for any mining company to come into the state. We agree that the state should create a 1-year pre-application process to ensure that collaboration exists between the agency and the mining company. We acknowledge the important role that the Corps of Engineers plays in joint preparation of an environmental impact statement in order to save time and reduce the mining company's costs. We agree that the company should be the responsible party to pay for an EIS. However, we both agreed on limiting how much the company would pay on state staffing costs, which means it's possible that taxpayers would end up paying, in the case of a mining company, the cost of applying for a permit when they don't for other applications. We agree that the local impact payment should be increased from $50,000 to $75,000. So you begin to see that there is a good foundation of areas where there is an agreement. Now, there are several other areas where there is differences in the way we approach the issue, but they're not dramatic in most cases. We agree that the new ferrous mining law needs to distinguish between sulfide and ferrous mining. Each of the plans includes a timeline for review of the permits. And I might note that under current law, it could go as long as 7 years. Under the Assembly plan, the process could take 600 days. Under our plan, the process could take 540 days. So that you have you're not that far apart in trying to determine what would be a sensible period of time to consider how long it takes to do a permit. Now, I'm going to admit to you, and I think any one of my fellow colleagues, I know Representative Milroy, would not be able to tell you, nor would there be anyone in this room that knows how long it takes to review the permits to dig a 1,000-foot hole in an area that is so sensitive to water needs, where the hydrological challenges are so great. No one knows what the right amount of time is. However, when you talk to the Army Corps of Engineers, or when you speak with the individuals in Minnesota, it takes between 2 and 4 years after an application is submitted, 2 to 4 years to complete an environmental impact and statement and then approve the permit. In other words, the reality of these complicated processes are such that you can't impose some political, fictitious timetable that sounds good for politics, but does not have any meaningful impact in terms of how long this process takes. We both agreed that the bill should include off-ramps so that there's flexibility. When this company applied for its boring permit, they failed to include part of the stormwater discharge permit, and which the DNR simply worked with them to submit that. But the company, there was a time limit on how long the department had to finish the permit. What the company asked for was additional time. The company asked for additional time because the conditions were wet and they wanted to wait for drier conditions so that there could be an opportunity to go out and review the property. Now, you don't want to put into the law a strict timetable that can't be met. You want to put goals in the law or targets in the law, but you have to be able to provide both sides the ability to work together in doing what is right. Because ultimately what matters to the company is that they have a good working relationship with the agency, because it is the agency that will be defending the permit that would eventually could be challenged in court. And so you want it done right, and you want it to comply with air and water quality standards. And the fact is that it is very important for sides to work together in trying to get it right. Now, we also agreed, and this is a very important point where there's been a lot of misinformation about this issue, is that we agree that there should be an end date to assure that the process does not needlessly drag out. In other words, when the deadlines are met, Senator Schultz and my proposal said the department has to issue a decision. So did the Assembly. Now, the Assembly proposal said that if the department doesn't issue the permit when the deadlines are there, that the state would have to return all of the fees paid by the company. That is one option to assure that there is an absolute drop-dead date. And I think that we could have easily worked out, there was no real intention by us to provide wiggle room for the process to drag on. We want an end date when both sides believe that it is time. For those of you who have taken the time to understand mining projects, it is often that mining companies will ask for regulators to delay the process because they have discovered new information, or they want additional time to be able to work out modifications to the proposal that they submit. In other words, you can't simplify some of these complicated nature just in a few minutes, a poster or a bumper sticker. And we agree on the need to establish a 5-year minimum local impact fee to help local taxpayers. Now, this is an issue that you all should be concerned about. The fact is that in Minnesota, they made a very smart decision 50 years ago to create what is called the IRRB, where the mining company pays a tonnage tax and then distributes that money to local communities and schools, and they invest that dollars in different projects so that the resources that come from mining are allocated not just to help communities who have to invest in their infrastructure and protect their taxpayers, but also diversify the economy when you have deep dips in the taconite industry. Those of you who are familiar with the taconite industry know that just about 8 or 10 years ago, Unemployment was extraordinarily high up in the Iron Range because the taconite demand was so soft. And it's very important to make sure that in the good times, the resources that come from some of the resources that profit the company are also shared in a responsible way to make sure that the taxpayers are protected and share in that resource as well. Wisconsin has what is called a net proceeds tax. The net proceeds tax, unlike Minnesota, which is a straight tonnage tax, Minnesota's tax, unlike Minnesota's, which is a straight tonnage tax, Wisconsin is a net proceeds tax, which is their gross proceeds minus their expenses. Now this is in lieu of property taxes. So the issue is, what is the best way, what kinds of resources will communities, Town of Morris, City of Mellon, Anderson, what kinds, Ashland, Iron County, what kinds of resources can they count on each year to make sure that their taxpayers and their school districts are getting an equivalent value for the ore that is being taken from the earth? In fact, under Wisconsin's law, because of the deductions and depreciation, a company may end up paying nothing or very little until years later when production is finally up and they have exhausted many of their deductions. Now it seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable expectation for all of you in this room, for those of us in the legislature, to try to make sure we get the best deal for the taxpayers of the state. Just as we want to get certainty for a mining company, you want certainty for taxpayers and the districts, the communities in which the mine operation is located. And we both agreed on the need for a contested case. However, and for those of you who may not be familiar, contested case is a quasi-legal procedure that is used in almost every water permit in the state of Wisconsin, in which citizens can challenge, under oath, can challenge experts and DNR officials before the permit is considered in a way of changing the permit. In other words, modifying the permit. The original attempt was to eliminate the right of citizens to have a voice at all. Eliminate it. Only for mining. So that citizens could use a contested case procedure as they did for the landfill that is located in Sorona, Wisconsin, just south of Shell Lake. But no one in northern Wisconsin would be able to use the contested case for this 1,000-foot hole in the ground. That simply is not defensible. If you're going to exempt it for everything, that's one thing. Wouldn't agree with that, but that would be one thing. But to say it's exempt only for this one mining project is simply indefensible. And it is undemocratic. And it is not fair to those who live in this area who may wish to use that basic right, but would be deprived of that right. Now, what Senator Schultz and I did, because the contested case is often viewed as a process that takes too long, what Senator Schultz and I proposed to do was include the contested case within the second 270-day review period. In other words, you can't use the contested case to go on 500 or 600 days to delay a project. It has to be done at the same time that the department is finally reviewing its application. So we responded to the goal of shortening the timeline, making sure it was not abused by anybody, but made sure that it was included, because people have a right to have their voice. Just as those are here with their voice, we respect that. You also need to respect the rights of others who want to exercise it in influencing a permit.